All right, so I love creating my own graphic organizers because oftentimes when I find one on the internet, it is not always exactly what I want, or the ones that come with the textbook are great, but then you have to make photocopies of them and then assign them to your students on paper. You know, they're not always fillable, which is always a concern. When you open up your blank Google Drawing, and remember to get to a blank Google Drawing, you go to your Drive, you go to New, More, and then Google Drawings. I like to set the page size first. It's set up with a generic size that Google always has. But if you go to File and then Page Setup, I've got this set up 8.5 by 11, so it looks like a portrait piece of paper. You can also do 11 by 8.5 to make it landscape, just however you normally want it. There's a couple of ways to get started. You can take something that already exists and make it fillable, which is always a good idea. So I just did a Google image search for Venn diagrams because that's one that I know that's used a lot out there. My problem with Venn diagrams as an English teacher was this little middle section's never big enough, and kids would like write two things and then think they're done because the box is done. So, you know, that's something you can think about. But let's just find another graphic organizer. This one's lovely because it's like a web, so it's kind of a brainstorming thing. So really, you know, you can find any sort of graphic organizer that exists out there. This would be a nice bubble map. Let's just start easy. I'm going to take this one that already exists. I'm going to right click on it and copy. And then I'm going to go back to my drawing, and I'm going to right click paste or Control C, Control V. Then I can increase the size so it fills up my space. It's got that lovely little border around it, so it looks nice already. I'm gonna fill up the space a little bit better. All right, maybe I want to give it a title. So with the T for the text box, I'm going to draw a little text box here, and I'm going to give it the title of, this is actually a thinking map, bubble map. Because that's definitely another issue with ones that you find on the internet. Like, what is this thing? What are we supposed to do? So if I give it a title, I can change the font, maybe bold it, increase the size a little bit so it's readable. There we go. That looks nice. Now, what are the kids going to put in these boxes? There's no labels here. So I can use text boxes to add a label for what this is. So for this one, this would be main idea. And then the rest of these would be supporting detail. And if you just click the text box, it creates that really long, skinny one. Once I've got that text box created, what I can then do is click on the box and then Control C, Control V, and make a copy of it and move it into place for the next one. So I can make a bunch of copies of that one since it's the same thing, and then move them into place. Now I have a graphic organizer that's actually labeled instead of just these blank bubbles. What I would do then, because this one's now done and ready to go, I can, let's call this one bubble map. I can click the share button, copy this link, go to my Google Classroom, go to classwork, and then create an assignment. I would give it instructions, of course. I'm not going to do that right now. But if I add it, you can find it in your Drive. You can also copy the link from the drawing itself. Now in Classroom, what's important is you always want to make sure you make a copy for each student if you want it to be fillable. So now I've got this copy for each student. So when the students open it, they will get a copy that looks just like this. What I would tell my students to do, because I want to assign this digitally and not print it, is that they need to click the T for the text box. They need to add a text box, and then they can write and fill in. You could add blank text boxes for them, depending on how old your students are and their tech level. You may or may not need to add those text boxes for them. The problem is if you don't put anything in the text box, it disappears when you click off of it. It's still there, I can click on it, but the students won't see it. So if you wanted to make this more fillable for students, You could maybe give it a fill color. And then they would know like, oh, that's where my answer goes. And then they could write in there. So, but really, once you've got your graphic organizer set up, you would then just go to Classroom and assign it and make a copy for each student, just like any other type of graphic organizer. One thing that I always like to do is comic strips, because kids can be creative and show their knowledge about any content area with a comic strip. You know, you can sign it about a historical figure or a scientific concept. You can use the shape tools. So if I use the square shape tool, and let's say I want to make my comic this shape. I don't want it to be blue. I want it to be white. And I'm going to give it a, let's say, blue border. It's a little bit thicker. There, that looks nice. Once you've got your shape, you can then just do Control-C, Control-V, and make copies. And now I can set this up like this. You can see I didn't change the shape of this canvas. So I can go back into page setup and change the shape now if I want. This just makes it easier if you do end up having to print it. And then it changes whatever elements are on the canvas, it changes those also. So, you know, you can play around with the formatting. Those little red guidelines are nice because they like will make it set up for you nicely. You can see there, I've got it lined up perfectly because those little red guidelines show me that it's lined up perfectly. Then a cool trick that you may or may not know about is you can actually click and drag. Do you see that little rectangle that's pulling up? I can click and drag and now move all of those elements at once. So instead of trying to line it up perfectly and then go, oh shoot, it's in the wrong spot, I can now move them into the right spot. What I might want to do, because this is a comic strip, let me see here. I'm going to move these. I'm going to move these two up a little bit so that the spacing matches. You might want to show them the order in which to put elements. So you could use an arrow. I could just draw an arrow connecting one to the next. It's nice to increase the size of those a little bit. Change the color. You can actually use this curved arrow, curved connector. And then what that does is I'm going to go from like, this is box 1, this is box 2. So 3 should be down here. And then box 4, I'll go back to a straight arrow. So you can see because my first arrow was red, that's what's chosen for my next arrow. So it's kind of nice that it's set up and ready to go. And now I've got these connectors showing the connection between the ideas. So you can really set it up however you want with as many or as few boxes. Those arrows, especially the elbow connector and the curved connector, can kind of connect things across the board. I always did a plot diagram for English, but as you know, a plot in a story is not exactly a straight line like you'll find on, if I do a Google image search. This is not quite how stories work. So I would recreate this with boxes and not have it quite be so mountain shaped. These shapes here are all fillable. So let's say I wanted to do comic strips with speech bubbles. And so this one's going to have this speech bubble, and I want these to be lightly gray, just so that they look a little different. And then for the next one, let's do a slightly different speech bubble because it's what you say and then what you think. I don't know. It could be whatever you want. You can see it's pulled that same gray color for them. So I'm going to copy those. You can flip-flop it so the speech bubble goes the other way. And now I've got that. Always add a title to your document, of course. And then I'll give it a title up here. That's the one thing about drawings. It never actually gives you the title up here. I make that size a little larger and a fun font. Let's do that one. That looks nice. So now I've got this comic strip that I've created, and that took me, what, maybe 5 minutes to create? And then I've got boxes that are actually fillable. So the students can actually click on this little speech bubble and double click on it, and now they can type inside the box. So they can really fill this in like an actual comic strip. You could also print this, if I was printing it and I had access to a black and white printer, I wouldn't worry about the colors as much, but this would look nice for, going on Classroom and being fillable. What I would suggest for students if they were doing a comic strip is they could model their ideas with the scribble tool, which is here under the arrow. If you go all the way down to the scribble, this writes more freely like a pencil. So maybe you would want to do them to write out the steps in a problem. So they could actually write that out. I'm just going to do a simple problem because I'm an English teacher. I am not a math or science teacher. There we go. And then they could use the text tool inside the shape to then talk about their process. That would be one way to do something like this. What you could also do is give them this shape as a place to go. If this was printable, they could draw their pictures. They could also insert an image and do a Google image search to find a picture. So if I was doing, like the plot of a story or a historical event, they could come up with the main ideas of the historical event or the plot of the story and then find images that would match. I always taught of Mice and Men. Unfortunately, when you do the Google image search, it usually just pulls the cover. So really then, you might want to go like, what does Lenny look like? Well, he's a large man. If you've ever read of Mice and Men, here's Lenny. So I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to insert it here into my shape. And now I can say what Lenny is thinking. And Lenny is always thinking about the rabbits. You can kind of see how you could use this with students. If I assigned this as a worksheet in Google Classroom, they can either show their work with the scribble tool. They could draw a picture with the scribble tool. It's not great, I'm not going to lie. If you wanted to do that, Jamboard would probably be a better idea. But they could also find images to fill this in. And see, it added that blue outline. So I just go up here and make that transparent. Now he looks like he's actually sitting in the box. For high school students, especially where, I wasn't so worried about their fine motor skills. I really wanted to just quickly understand how they understood the content. Doing something like this where they find images and give me some writing, that was a better assessment for me of how well they understood the content. So really it's up to you and how you think about using graphic organizers. So it's pretty easy to either find one that exists and modify it to fit your needs or to create one fresh like this. You could even do something like a Venn diagram, but you could make it fillable with the Shapes tool just by adding a couple of circles. The hard part is getting circles that are actually round. But, if I wanted to do that and then overlap them like this, I could make them transparent so you could actually see the shapes. And then I would probably have the students use a text box so that they could write in this whole space instead of trying to fit it inside the little lines. So that was always my concern. So those are probably the easiest ways to use drawings for graphic organizers. You can always click and drag over all your elements and then click the backspace button to delete them. That's quick and easy. You can actually insert a table. I don't like the way that tables look here versus a doc, but it's definitely possible. So like you could do something like this and have it be like a comic strip or boxes to fill in. That would look just fine. Drawings has built into it a diagram creator. It's a little more advanced for students, but if it's something that you wanted to create and then print, that would look good too. So you just go to Insert, Diagram, and then all the different styles show up over here. It's a little limited. There's not a lot of choices. Something like this, a timeline, would look good. Let's say I want to choose this timeline. I can choose how many events and then pick a color scheme. And then I just click it and it inserts over here. It's teeny tiny. That's my concern. These can be really good, but they need a little bit more editing, because if I click down here, this font at the bottom is size 8. So that's not really readable for most people. But these diagrams are kind of nice as a starting place for what a basic, graphic organizer could look like if I'm looking for ideas. So this one's nice if they wanted to do a timeline of an event or their lives. This could be a really cool, get to know each other activity, or something for foreign languages where they're practicing their vocabulary. So the diagrams are kind of fun to play with. So I think that is how to do graphic organizers in a nutshell. So if I've got a blank drawing set up, yeah, I would go to a Google image search and type in
just graphic organizers. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I just typed in graphic organizers, but then, it's got a bunch of ideas up here. These character ones are fun. Definitely, I wouldn't want to have to recreate these.
Oh gosh, no.
But if this is one that I liked, I can copy it, and then I'm going to paste this, and then increase the size so it matches my paper. Why this is better than printing it is that now my students can write text boxes on top of this. And with a doc, you can't add text boxes freely anywhere you want on the page. The formatting is very different in a doc. Can you do this in a Google Slides? Yes, you can, but then you've got multiple slides, and some kids get overwhelmed by too many pages. So this is nice if you want to provide for your students a single page.
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty tiny here, so you can always click the little zoom button and zoom in, and then have them fill it in. This is good too if you wanted to do something like I did a complete yearbook program, and they created entire yearbook spreads with Google Drawings, because you can get really nitty gritty with the details. Seating charts, it's actually great for seating charts for those of you who use those, because depending on your room, your room setup, I always had a hard time doing a seating chart. So then I would draw like little tables and be like, I have, 15 tables. And then I could just do like, Joey and Sarah. And so then I knew who was at my tables, or if you've got desks. But this is just a quick and easy way to do seating charts too, if you've got that.
I think I'll be good just messing around with it. Just kind of the information you gave me now is great. So I'll probably mess with that. And especially since I do special education. So this will definitely, because slides is correct. It's a lot of information. So this will be perfect.
Yeah, and I like it for special ed and for the younger kids that you can customize what's already out there. That's great from a UDL standpoint to make it more usable for students.
I actually use it for drawing in my art class. And I actually create drawing assignments, and the computer technology is a tool for creating art. And so I use it as the platform for digital arts.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's great for digital arts. And if we can get kids interested in the digital arts, they can go into, publishing or advertisement. I mean, there's so many art fields out there that combine art and technology together. So I think that's wonderful that you're using it with your students for creating art.